Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live right here on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been on this journey with us since the very beginning. So we are so grateful for them. Thank you so much, Folgers. We love you. Big thank you to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, who is an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music. Can be found anywhere that good music can be found. Example, Bandcamp, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, you name it. Just in time for Spooky Month, it's coming, and he's got new stuff out, so check him out. Big thank you to Steve McGinnis for all of the amazing banners that you see. Anything out there is definitely Steve McGinnis. Check him out. He does commissions. Awesome. Anyway, tonight, the Outer Realm welcomes for the very first time Charles Lear, and he's going to be discussing his new book, The Flying Saucer Investigators. So, oh my goodness, that's going to be going to the Wayback Machine, but it's a lot of things that people ask about, so he's got it. But in order to participate tonight, we are in 8 different chat rooms. The usual on YouTube, which is UFO Paranormal Radio, UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials, The Outer Realm, of course. And we head over to Facebook, News on the Flip Side. Again, United Public Radio, UFO Paranormal Radio, Canada's Most Haunted, Outer Realm, and Joe Montaldo, UFO Undercover. So I see we've got people chiming in. Helen, Natalie, John, hello. New faces. We like
I'm into that ASMR. How does that sound, guys?
What
is it? ASMR? It actually puts me to sleep. See how easily hypnotized I can be? I fall asleep and I have to turn the TV off.
Apparently, it does not take much.
That does it for me.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, word. It's ridiculous. No, it does take much. It takes a couple of pills. Under my tongue, one down my throat, and this. So it takes a lot to put me to
nice,
sleep.
Relaxing toddy or something will do it for me. It doesn't take much at all. So
yeah.
But our guest tonight, guys, is only with us for until about 10:30. So then you get to put your questions together, and we get to do a little bit of jamming just with us for a little while. So that'll be fun, as always. Because we're like amazing, just saying.
Yeah, just saying. I got new books too, but I'm not impressed.
Books. Not uh-oh.
Nope.
Why?
Oh, well, I'll talk about it after, or we have time because I'd rather read his. Or you want me to talk about it
now? No, because our guest is going to be here in a few minutes, so it's better to just read his bio. Then we can do some belly aching afterwards.
Yeah.
All right.
I just
Hey, Chris. Yes, do it. Okay. We're going to, I'm just firing off his link. So,
and I will read you his bio. Fantastic. Charles Lear's interests in ufology have led him to research documented history in the phenomenon as well as the investigators created, all of which are recognized in his book, The Flying Saucer Investigators. Charles has lived most of his life in New York City as a union stagehand, where he also engaged in other aspects of the theater, including a Shakespearean actor. So please kindly welcome our guest tonight, Charles Lear.
And we are just waiting for him to chime in. And while we do that, I'm going to post it on our Facebook page a little bit about the book. The Flying Saucer Investigators, a book of history. It's about the people involved in the mystery of flying saucers, mostly the investigators, but also the witnesses, some of whom were profoundly affected The period covered is what has been called the golden age of flying saucers. Well, you know it is when they're calling them flying saucers, which is amazing, which begins in roughly
Yes.
1947
Yeah.
after oh, good. There he is. Good. So he can
Makes
tell
sense
you
because it's right
things.
after, Hitler. So,
I know.
yeah.
Well, hello.
Hi, how are
Yeah.
you?
Hi there. How are you? You hear me all right? Everything good?
Yeah,
We
perfect.
can. Sounds great.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Beautiful. So how are you?
I'm doing great. Good night.
Yeah.
Late. This is, believe it or not, this is late for me. But
Oh,
I
is
was
it?
going to
Oh,
say,
no.
you're in New York City. We're at the same time zone.
oh no. I get it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I
I
get
No,
it. It's
no,
a
I
work thing.
understand. You have an
Yeah, yeah.
early morning. Yeah,
yeah, but
I
don't
understand that.
don't worry about this. Actually, this is a good time.
Oh,
So,
good.
Oh,
I'm
good.
glad. Well, welcome, of course, to the show. We've got a lot of people listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about your book because I don't know of many books out there that actually talk about the investigators for flying saucers, UFOs. I mean, you get more of it now, whistleblowers, things like that, but you really went into some heavy research for this book, and I'd like to delve into that a little bit. But before, I'd like to kind of touch on humble beginnings is how I like to start. What led you? I mean, you must have had an experience. What led you to want to research this specifically?
This specifically,
Well, UFOs in general.
John Keel's book. Oh well,
Ah.
UFOs in general.
John Keel, I know, right there. That's all you got to say.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Right.
Mothman prophecies. I had it.
Yes.
I had it in my brain that it would make a really cool television series with John Keel as the protagonist,
Oh yes.
and that could be done really well.
Oh yes.
So I read the book over and over and over again because the book is so strange, and I couldn't figure out why is this so weird. I realized it's super dense. It's about 6 books in one. I actually mentioned that in the book.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's not about it. It's a little bit about the Mothman, but it's also about contactees in Long Island. It's about Men in Black. It's about UFOs all over the place. There. And actually, his editors cut out at least half the book, and he ended up putting out the 8th Tower with material he left out from the book.
Oh,
But in
wow.
any case, to your question,
Take it wherever you want. You'll see we're pretty laid back.
there are these interesting characters that keep showing up in this book: Gray Barker, Jim Moseley, Ivan T. Sanderson, and these guys sound really interesting, especially Gray Barker and Jim Moseley, who seem to mess with John Keel at the height of his paranoia. And so I looked into who these people might be, and of course, discovered Gray Barker's book. They knew too much about flying saucers, published in 1956, about centered around. Really centered around the Albert K. Bender mystery with the International Flying Saucer Bureau, the first international private flying saucer organization that got started in 1952. It only lasted a year, and Bender at the end claimed that he had been visited by 3 men in black. The mythos really got started there.
And that in itself is wiggy,
Yeah, and a lot of people thought that the organization got so big so fast that Bender was looking for a dramatic way out. But in any case, I write a regular blog for Martin Willis over at Podcast UFO, and I started writing blogs about the individual characters, and really got fascinated by this. Also, as I was writing for Martin, I've been writing for about 4 years, a blog a week. So that's a lot of blogs.
That's a lot of blogs.
So I started, I found my place, I found my voice and how I like to approach the subject while writing for Martin. And that's as an historian, because this is facts. These are actual, a witness actually reported this. There was an actual file on this. Sometimes a police report, Air Force files. And so,
but you had to dig for this, right? Like, I mean, you had to dig for this stuff, right? I mean,
it's not that hard. It's
Really?
not that hard. After 4 years of writing for Martin, I learned where all the archives are.
See, yeah, because I mean, that was a faux pas back then. You could not talk about this.
Oh no!
Oh, so circles. This is the regular folk not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, with the flying saucer investigators, it's a subculture. It was a subculture, and it's still, the ufology still is a subculture.
Pretty much.
It's very small. Once you get to know somebody, I got to know Martin, and now Martin introduced me to David Marler. I was able to visit David Marler's house. I was got to talk to Barry Greenwood, and have exchanged emails with some of the luminaries in ufology, just because it is a subculture. Right. So, anyway, so I got the idea to write about the investigators just because of my interest in it. And what happened was Martin Willis suggested I write a book, possibly compiling all the blogs. And I said, you know what? I've got a better idea. I'm thinking of writing about the investigators. He hooked me up with Philip Mantle, who runs Flying Disc Press.
Yeah, Philip's a friend. He's a sweetie.
Oh yeah, he really is. And the interesting connection between him and Martin was that guest blogger of Martin's wrote about before me, wrote about the Pascagoula incident, and somebody,
that was my dog.
It's quite. Oh, what kind of dog do you? It's all good.
But anyway, Morky, he just noticed the box. So he's like, "What is that?" Sorry, I didn't even know he was in the room.
So Martin, somebody commented on the blog saying that was a really good blog. Right. Thank you very much, Calvin. And Martin
thanks,
said,
Calvin.
This wouldn't be Calvin Parker, would it? And what's interesting, Calvin Parker had been underground, in terms of the Pascagoula incident, pretty much since it happened. He claimed to have been unconscious during the whole thing. It turns out when he wrote his book, he wasn't. So Martin got in touch with Calvin, and he hooked Calvin up with Philip Mantle. Calvin was convinced to write a book, but he said only if you don't edit a single word. And Philip agreed. And Calvin locked himself in a room for 2 weeks and banged out a book this thick. For those who are listening, just about 2 inches thick, a tome. And the book was very successful. So Philip was thankful to Martin. Right. And when Martin contacted Philip about me, Philip said, yeah, pitch your idea. I pitched my idea, and Philip went for it. So,
yes. Yeah. Well, he knows good content when he hears it. That's for sure. Let's get back to, for a moment with John Keel. I mean, aside from Mothman, his whole multi-universe theory, everything behind it, that guy is it was always just way ahead of his time.
Well, it's interesting. I've just I'm in the process now of rereading They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers.
Yeah.
Ray Barker's book.
Right.
And it's a really good piece of history. And it's Ray Barker at his best, really.
Right.
Before he, got all pranksterish and Gray Barker, a lot of people accuse Gray Barker of being a hoaxer straight out. It's more probably more proper to look at him as a folklorist,
Right.
somebody who's interested in a really good story.
Hmm.
But in any case, Gray Barker started. I forgot that Gray Barker talked about the Borderland Sciences Research Organization, which was they studied probably the very first UFO story put out in a magazine. They put out a regular publication called the Round Robin, and there was this object that was seen that was kind of like this, almost like an old airship with flapping wings flying across the moon.
I've researched those crazy things. They go way back.
Yeah, so they called it
Right?
getting to where Keel started coming from.
Yeah.
Borderland Sciences was started by Meade Lane, who looked at it with a scientific point of view, but at the same time surrounded himself with psychics and people into more esoteric approaches.
Right.
And esotericism has its roots in theosophy, Madame Blavatsky and all that kind of stuff, where you talk to, you go into trances and talk to elders who are in this mystical realm. And he had this guy named Mark Probert, who contacted these, what he called his controls, clairaudiently. And his controls told him that this was a Carita, and it was piloted by the Etherians. And they got into this whole thing about that these, as it went on, they investigated UFOs more and more and talked about the idea that these things would materialize and dematerialize from another dimension. So this is way back in 1940,
that's pretty high tech for early days.
40s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can see like there's a root to John Keel's thinking.
Yeah.
With
brilliant.
being open to the esoteric and open to the idea that there's, maybe another dimension, maybe
much like Jacques Vallée, right? Like they
Jacques Vallée came on later, so a lot of people say John Keel was the pioneer. John Keel popularized this,
I think so, yes,
in the midst of a lot of criticism from the UFO community.
It's outside the norm. People think everything's from space. It's like I don't think so. I think a lot of it's already here. But I like the whole different dimensional theory. It just makes a heck of a lot more sense.
Well, especially
littered with portals and power spots, and
especially when you get into the, when you really look at the reports and discard the narrative, which is a very, very old narrative. I've been on a lot of podcasts where people are still in the 80s and 90s talking about grays.
No.
You know how many creatures there are reported there?
I know. I'm just surprised they're still just focused on grays. I mean,
it's like they never heard Bill Moore's speech at the 1989 MUFON symposium where he said, you know what? You've been had. A lot of disinformation agents are feeding you a lot of BS. And also, a really great guy is Jack Brewer, who has a blog site, UFO Trail, and he writes a lot about the intelligence community connection to the UFO, to ufology and their unseen hand, possibly. Especially there are big ties between the intelligence community and NICAP. A lot of ex-CIA members were founders and members of NICAP throughout its existence.
Wow.
I don't go into that in the book because it takes you on a sideline, and Jack Brewer did a much better job than I did.
Right.
But he's done extensive research, basically on abduction. He wrote a good book called The Grays Have Been Framed, where he really talks about the abuses of regressive hypnosis, and how the key researchers at the time tended to get what they wanted out of their witnesses to fit a narrative.
Right.
Basically, that there were, to go extreme, David Jacobs said there were the Greys were genetically experimenting with us to basically
Wow.
replace us.
Yeah.
But this is so
And-
old, and
Very.
So,
so
what are
many.
your thoughts on the Greys for those who are listening in?
Maybe
people-
they seem to be a part of it. A lot of people doing
Sure.
ayahuasca,
Ayahuasca. Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't
Yeah.
see it either. I
Let's
have
throw a
to
little
get Michelle.
DMT in there. It's like
Michelle
Yeah,
has
yeah.
to see it for me. So
Yeah.
what's it?
ayahuasca. You did the best job.
ayahuasca.
Yeah,
Ayahuasca.
we
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
question her. Why is it that you say it
this
better than the rest
actually
of us?
the guy who popularized the guy who brought that to popular consciousness was William S. Burroughs.
Oh, was he? I don't know, because
yeah,
my son
you-
keeps trying to get me to Peru to go with some old
Oh, my
Peruvian shaman. I'm like,
goodness.
I'll never come out alive. I know it.
it's
Don't you
apparently
get
they
sick
say
after you drink it? Doesn't it make you vomit? Sorry to interrupt
it's
you.
pretty gnarly. Apparently, if you do
Yeah.
actually do the vines, it's probably better to just take DMT. I'm not
You're
recommending
Oh
it.
my
right.
But the saying is that LSD
Mm.
is like a
Yeah.
journey. It's like a cruise, and a
Ayahuasca.
ayahuasca is
Ayahuasca,
like being
yeah.
shot out of a cannon.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, thank you.
But a lot of
We're not
people-
promoting doing DMT, just saying.
No,
Thank you.
no, not
A
at
lot
all.
of people have claimed to see
Right.
what really fit the description of Greys during these trips. So that's
Interesting.
pretty interesting. But,
Right.
there's a researcher, Albert Rosales,
Mhm.
who has put out a lot of books and has a catalog of humanoid reports. And the variety is extensive.
Mhm.
And I still find humanoid reports today.
Mhm.
And they're all different. They're not Greys. And so,
Mhm.
what
Well,
I found
Paul
is it
Hillier
doesn't.
even said there were how many? Like 60, 160 different races of extraterrestrials. But how
Good
much
luck.
of that is like memory
I-
scrub too? This is what we look like. This is who we are.
Yeah, because you think about it, how many races are we here? Like how
Sure.
many cultures? How many, like, come on. How could it be that it's only one or it's only 10 or it's only 100? There's no way that we could know that.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe somebody does know.
No,
but
it's
but
all
I don't.
it's
They'll never tell
speculation.
Yeah.
But when you get back to the history,
Mhm.
just looking at it as an historian and writing about it with journalistic discipline,
Mhm.
which I learned online.
Attaboy. Yeah.
Well, what's the journalistic code? So, and also, my father was a biophysicist, and I taught myself science. Basically, I've got a real interest in paleontology and
Mm.
geology, and I've read a lot of scientific papers, and so what that has given me, just approaching it from a journalistic and historical approach,
Mhm.
is I'm just dealing with facts.
Mhm.
I speculate as little as possible.
Mhm.
And even with that, what I've found is, especially writing a blog a week mostly about historic cases,
Mhm.
which many obscure. And I'm never at a loss for material every
Mhm.
week, no problem.
Wow.
There are so many out there, and you see patterns. One big pattern that John Keel mentions in the Mothman prophecies
Mhm.
is Klieg conjunctivitis, also known as welder burn, which I'm a welder at the Metropolitan Opera. And I've had welder burn, and it hurts like a mother. It's
Yes,
basically
yes.
sunburn of the eyes. And it showed up in some Mothman witnesses, and it shows up over and over and over again in UFO reports. So that's,
That I didn't know.
Yeah,
And do they
yeah.
say why exactly? Just the
John,
brightness? Is it the ships? Is it the environment? Is it
Jo-
what does he say?
John Keel's speculation
Okay.
is that these things exist in a different, the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay.
Right.
Visible light is a narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Light is electromagnetism. So, John Keel's speculation is that maybe what people are seeing exist outside of the electromagnetic spectrum. I think they come in through infrared and
Mm.
go out through ultraviolet. So if you're going out through
That's interesting.
ultraviolet, the ultraviolet is what causes the cleat
Mm.
conjunctivitis. And there have also been reports of sunburn too. That's another common report I've seen over and over and over again, and
Right.
not from a single researcher like John Keel telling me this,
Mm-hmm.
but from the actual reports I've read in newspaper accounts, in files.
Mm.
It's like, oh, there's sunburn again. Oh, there's cleat conjunctivitis again, and so you start to see these patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And just approaching it from that, not as a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Hmm.
anyway,
No, I think it's fascinating. Just right down to, all the eyewitness accounts of something coming into the room or their home or their space. It's always that big flash of light. So I'm thinking, because I've had it happen to me, and it's freaking blinding. It really is. It came into the house and was like, it was just, it lit the whole room up, bounced against the wall, bounced back out. And I mean, I had to adjust, So I'm thinking I could see just from that standpoint, it being, if you're up in the middle of the night and something comes barreling at you. I mean, I can't explain how bright it was.
well, that's fascinating to me because I've never experienced anything.
Oh, wow.
I've had psychic dreams,
Hmm.
probably the closest I've ever gotten to the paranormal.
Right.
But so I've talked to other people, and I've also listened. I'm a fan of where did the rogue go, uh,
Okay.
which I was. That's Soraya Azkath has that podcast going, and he has a lot of people that just like you have, you know, pretty casually and matter of factly said, "I have had this experience."
I've had lots.
So
I'm
yeah,
very casual about it.
so
Yeah.
since I have not, and
Yeah.
other people like me have not,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I say, okay, there are two types of people: experiencers and non-experiencers.
Mm-hmm.
And when people talk about disclosure, for instance,
Right.
there's an argument that it doesn't matter how much evidence you present,
Mm-hmm.
unless people actually have the experience, they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be ultimately a believer.
Mm-hmm.
People who have had experience are believers, and some people actually call them knowers.
Right.
I know this exists. I know there's something weird going on. I've had enough weird experiences that I know that the consensus narrative of uh, materialistic Western scientific reality
Mm-hmm.
is not quite accurate. I think that
Big
there's
time.
definitely
Big
something
time.
going on that
There's I
we're not
agree.
grasping.
No,
That's
there's a lot, or we're just not being given the full story. So it's hard not, how do you
yeah.
grasp something that you're only given bits and pieces of? I think, going back as far as your research goes, you couldn't talk about things like that. You'd end up in a psych ward,
Yeah,
Still
actually,
can.
the way
right?
people are
Still
talking
can.
now,
Yeah.
yeah, it depends. I mean,
Depends who you see.
well, it also depends on how well you handle it. I mean, some of these experiences really mess people up.
Right. Yeah.
I've also come across that in a
Well, they're
lot of
messing
cases.
with your memories. You don't know what's real and what's not, depending on how many times you've been experiencing, shall we say? Because I prefer the term experiencer to abductee, so to speak, because I don't think they're all abductions.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
But A common thing I see with UFO cases is that the witness will have an experience and then their mind gets messed up. This often happens, and there are two ways. One, the experience is overwhelming and it freaks them out. But the more common thing is that they get in the spotlight and they can't handle the spotlight. And so what happens is they start embellishing their story, and the story gets so wacky. I think a good example of this is Woodrow Derenberger, who I wrote about in the book. In 1966, he lived in Mineral Wells, West Virginia, a hotspot of strangeness, West Virginia. And he claimed to have been driving from, he was a traveling salesman. So he was driving from, he was driving home to Mineral Wells, West Virginia. And he said what he thought was a car was driving alongside him. Then it pulled up in front of him and then turned sideways and was rolling sideways, and then stopped and forced him to pull over to the side of the road. A door opened and a creature came out, arms folded, black clothing, metallic shirt, and a pleasant expression on his face. This creature has become known as the Grinning Man, and often you'll see kind of insidious looking grin on it with teeth and all this nastiness.
Oh, lovely.
But Derenberger described him as having a pleasant expression.
Right.
He walked up to Derenberger's window, passenger window, and asked him. No, he communicated to Derenberger to roll down his window. Derenberger rolled down his window, and this is a weird part of Derenberger's story. Derenberger rolled down the driver's side window, and this creature came up to the human-looking creature came up to the passenger side window and started communicating with him telepathically. Derenberger describes saying he suddenly realized he was hearing words and this guy's lips weren't moving.
Right.
So,
which is pretty normal, with ET communication. Right.
Yeah. Reports of ET communication. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, the creature, asked, do you work for a living? What do you do? What's that over there?
What's your sign? That's just so bizarre. What a bizarre conversation.
Yeah. It was real simple. And he said his name was Cold, and said, go tell your story, go tell people, you met me, and I'll come back and confirm your story. And then this thing that had originally been on the road had been hovering about 50 feet above the ground the whole time Derenberger was talking to it, according to Derenberger. And then it came down, the creature got in, it went off. Derenberger later said the creature's name was Indrid Cold. The creature visited him later. Now,
a name like a human. Sorry, Charles. Wait a minute.
Indrid Cold. So Indrid,
wow.
Yeah, Indrid Cold's a bit of a internet meme. So
Right.
Type that in. You'll find the Grinning Man with his nasty looking face, and it's not the pleasant expression that Derenberger described.
Oh my God.
But Gray Barker actually investigated this first. He first interviewed Woodrow Derenberger. And actually what's really cool, and this is back to the internet research, you can find Derenberger's very first interview the day after at a television studio. And he's telling straight out. And he sounds so damn sincere. He's got, this beautiful West Virginia accent. And he's very polite. Well, sir, this man came over to me. I mean, it's so, yeah, you type that in, look for it.
Yes.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's 1966. So Clark,
Holy crap.
Gray
Right.
Barker interviewed this guy, and so did John Keel. And that's when they got the name Indrid. And then this story started kind of going off the rails because, you know, the newspapers were carrying this
Of
whole
course,
story.
yeah.
He's
The
been,
fish just keeps getting bigger every time someone tells it, right?
Yeah. So all of
Yeah.
a sudden, these creatures are, you know, he wrote a book called Visitors from Lanulos. And he claimed that these beings from other planets were visiting him. He claimed to have been taking aboard a craft, and, you know, typical contactee type story.
Right. Yeah.
And what's really awesome is that he claimed that it was very warm on the planet. So often, basically, they were space nudists. A lot of the people on the planet walked around without any
I had
clothes.
to shake my head, make sure I was still in the same conversation here. What?
Yes. So that's actually a chapter of my book, Space Nudists.
Wow.
So
I love it.
yeah,
I love
so
It's different.
yeah, and Derenberger stuck to his story to
the end,
to his detriment. I mean, his life fell apart. He lost his family.
Well, that's a really hard thing. You know, that's what I'm saying. Like, things just weren't all that acceptable back then. I mean, it was just like, even people in having paranormal experiences, you know, grew up in a family, because we don't talk about that. That's a family secret. It's like, what? This is cool shit, and you can't talk about it.
Yeah, I grew up in that house.
What is this about?
Yeah.
It was seriously, yeah. So, I mean, I can't even imagine. Like, I was fortunate to grow up, you know, in a family where my mother worked in a planetarium with a priest, and they would analyze photos for NASA. You know, everything was all blacked out, so all you got were the pictures of UFOs.
Oh, wow.
And this, she would sort them and arrange them for, I mean, I guess he was the authority at a university and at the planetarium. So they were practicing, the astronauts allegedly practiced up there before the moonwalk. So there was all associated, this whole thing. So she did that. We're going back into the 70s, right? Of course, the 60s rather. So it's just sort of like, you know, a lot of that. So that wasn't deterred in me. I remember being a young child having experience, but I'd look to the stars all the time. I'd sit outside and go, all right, where is it? You know, it was normal and it wasn't discouraged. But unfortunately, I think it is on an average discouraged. Like I said, you end up in a loony bin at some point if you tried to talk about it back then. But now it's like, you know, with the internet, we're becoming more aware, and everybody's got a camera phone. You can't really hide it anymore. People can take their own photos. They can do their own recordings, their own audio, video. You know, you can't just hide it. But what is being hidden, you know, and even back then when you look at Blue Book, oh no, everything is just a complete misidentification. It's not what you think. What do they have? Like over 12,000 reports of something? Are they all, even if it's a smidge that wasn't, it's like, come on, you know, like,
yeah. Well, what I found in my research, it depends on who's in charge. So NASA right now is saying, yeah, we're going to investigate UFOs.
Them too, yes.
Well, because the guy in charge of NASA is friendly to it. That's all there is to it. He's open-minded to it. You know, when the Air Force got hauled into Congress, another chapter in my book, they got hauled into Congress because Gerald Ford was a representative of Michigan, where a bunch of sightings took place, and a press conference. J.L.N. Hynek, the scientific consultant for the Air Force, went down to Michigan to investigate, and he called an unprecedented press conference.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the explanations he offered, among others, was that because this big craft was reported to be seen in a swamp, and he suggested that people were seeing marsh gas that would light up, be ignited, go out, and then ignite in another
I
spot.
could see it. I
Go
could
out.
see it. I mean,
And,
you
and
know,
Hynek's
it's a spectacle in
just
itself. Sure.
Hynek's a scientist just looking for a
Sure.
prosaic
Logical guy.
explanation. And
Yep.
you know, my father told me, you know, that the best scientists seek to disprove their
Of course.
hypotheses.
Right.
So, you know, he's being a good
12,000
scientist,
times.
but he did it in front of the press. The press went away and changed marsh gas to swamp gas.
Right.
As far as I can tell, in the video you can find on YouTube,
Right.
there are, Hynek says marsh gas the whole time, and marsh gas became swamp gas in the press,
Right.
and a lot of people got incensed with that, and Gerald Ford especially, and he was a House Minority Speaker at the time.
Right.
You know what?
Yeah, doesn't matter what you say.
Yeah. So he approached two committees and
Right.
said, I suggest you hold a hearing and bring the Air Force in to explain themselves, essentially.
Right.
And I think it was the Armed Services Committee said, you know, hey, Air Force, come on in.
Right. Right.
What are you doing?
Right.
So, you know, that's another example of who's in charge. And so when Edward J. Ruppelt was in charge, Edward J. Ruppelt, basically what happened was the first incarnation of it was Army Air Forces started investigating. And I think, no, by the time the investigation got really started, it was the Air Force as we know it. The Army Air Forces became the Air Force, essentially. And after Kenneth Arnold's sighting, there was an investigation, and then it became formalized into Project Sign, and then became Project Grudge, I think, throughout maybe 49. And Sign, they actually gave an estimate of the situation. This is legendary. I don't believe anybody, the original document's never been found, where they said that we think these things are from other planets. And they said, no.
Yes. We're going to talk about that.
No.
Stop right there. Yeah, I do that.
So Grudge got started, and Ruppelt in his book, The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects, published in 1956, said that, you know, the official line was that there was nothing to the name Grudge, but he said, yes, there was indeed. And Grudge became a PR exercise, get the public off our back, explain this away any way possible. Well, what happened was there was a group of people, I think it was Monmouth Air Force Base in New Jersey, and a group of people were touring it, and I think some high-powered brass were among them, and a radar operator was demonstrating the radar, and all of a sudden something came on the radar that went way faster than anything we had or
and back then
knew.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So basically one thing led to another, and it came out that Grudge was not seriously investigating unidentified flying objects. And I forget who was in charge at the Pentagon at the time, but he was incensed and said, regardless of what these things might be, you're supposed to be investigating them, and you're not. Get your act together.
Right.
And so word came down. So at the Air Technical Intelligence Command in Dayton, Ohio, which is where this thing was housed, and you know, it's interesting. If you'll see movie versions of like the Air Force, you know, the Air Force UFO investigation, you'll see all these desks.
Right.
If there were 3 desks,
that
would be a lot.
It would look good, though, didn't it?
A secretary and maybe, you know, 4 officers.
Right.
So Edward J. Ruppelt was there. He was a very decorated I think he was a lieutenant at the time, and he'd seen combat and was decorated, and he had established a reputation for being a very he would get the job done, and he was very earnest and a hard worker.
Mm-hmm.
And so he essentially got saddled with revamping Project Grudge.
Wow.
Uh, and it wasn't considered a career enhancement. It was more of a pain in the butt. So
Right.
Ruppelt describes in his book
Mm.
taking files out of boxes that were tied up with string
Oh, geez.
and actually putting them into filing cabinets.
Right.
They had an existing contract with Battelle. He got a hold of them and said, can you help us with a computer filing system where we can cross-index stuff? I can imagine what the computers in
I can't imagine.
1902 were.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Oh, the
And-
dot matrix, wasn't it then? Wasn't it dot?
Yeah.
No,
Like
it was
typewriter one figure jobber.
punch cards.
Oh.
Punch cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Computer-
I had a computer in 92, so I'm asking. That's why I'm asking.
Computers the size of buildings and punch cards.
Right.
It was half my desk. It was half my desk, the computer. The screen was
Wow.
literally half my desk.
That
Yeah.
yeah.
It was ridiculous. I would work on the side or go into the lunchroom to use the damn table because I couldn't even work at my desk.
Yeah.
Oh,
Everything was wired too.
I remember my mother had to buy a calculator in the 70s.
Oh,
This
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
this thing was about 2.5 inches thick.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just
6 inches long.
I
And
play music on
3 inches
calculators.
wide.
Yeah.
And this thing, I think it cost like $200.
It
Oh,
was
yeah, they were
ridiculous, right?
astronomical back
And
then.
the highest calculation it could do was a square root.
I
But
was
anyway.
so good on that thing that I didn't even have to look at it. That's how often I used one.
Yeah. So anyway, Ruppelt put Blue Book together, and he was only there for a year, but in that year they got slammed. And in the summer of 1952, there was a wave, or a flap, as they called it, that was unprecedented. And they ended up, I think, they ended up working 14 hours a day, 6 days a week,
Mhm.
flying all over the place. And it was absolutely crazy. There are also a lot of good historical cases come out of that. The Washington merry-go-round came out of that 2 weekends in July.
Mhm.
Blips were seen on radar, and there were visual sightings over restricted airspace in Washington.
Mhm.
But essentially, Ruppelt did a really earnest investigation. And what's amazing is that he wrote this book of what was formerly classified, and you get a real insight into how this operated. And what's interesting is you really see them making it up as they go along. You also get a sense of the military mindset, which is not
Mm.
really geared for this kind of thing. They're
Mhm.
not scientists, especially these guys. They're
Mhm.
basically grunts.
Right.
But do your job.
Right.
And he did the best job he could. So throughout what I've read about the Air Force investigation, it was grabbing at straws and trying to fit things into boxes and try to make things make sense, and pretty damn clumsy, quite frankly. And then another period in the 60s, the early 60s, was Robert Friend was in charge. And Robert Friend is a former Tuskegee airman. J. Allen Hynek spoke highly of him, saying he really looked at it from a balanced point of view. And they did some earnest investigation during that. One of the best was the Joe Simonton case with the pancakes. Are you guys familiar with that?
No, I've not heard. Obviously, I remember pancakes.
Oh, okay. Joe Simonton was a plumber, part-time chicken farmer in Eagle River, Wisconsin. And he claimed that one morning a classic flying saucer landed in his driveway. He went out to investigate, and when he came out, a door opened. He saw a creature that he described as wearing a suit. I forget the material, but black suit. He described it as being human-looking, swarthy, like an Italian. I think it was around 5 feet tall.
I'm taller than 5 feet.
Yeah.
But this was his words, not mine.
Right.
But he, the creature made a gesture like drinking and then handed him a vessel. And then Simonton said, "Oh, water." And he went in, filled the vessel up, gave it to the creature. The creature said, "Thanks." Gave him a salute, described as touching his forehead. And Simonton gave him a military salute, according to the story. So Simonton also saw two other creatures, one tethered to a control board, what looked like a control board, and another tethered to what looked like a stove, and it looked like he was cooking something on a griddle.
I
didn't think they ate.
These are not humanoid, like humans.
They look human, but they're in a
engineering
flying saucer, and this is 1961. So
our knowledge is that they don't eat. So, like our food, they would never drink our water or eat our food. Or
well, some crafts have been seen.
This is the story
at the Olive Garden.
I remember my mother telling me a story. One of the photos that she had seen was a craft. They would hover over lakes, and there were photos of water just being streamed, just like a water funnel, just going up into the craft. So I don't know.
Well, maybe they shower. Maybe
it's just like waterfall. Woo! I don't know, but that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, we haven't gotten to the good part yet.
Okay, we're going to
so
go
Simonton's looking at this creature that looks like it's cooking. It looks like it's cooking pancakes, and the creature who wanted the water looked over and grabbed 4 pancakes and handed them to Simonton. Then, according to the report, the craft tilted up and shot off.
So crazy.
A tree in the background bent over and then sprung up like it was a cartoon.
That's just crazy. Oh my God.
So Simonton went to, well, this is a good story because basically what happened, the way I approached it this is a popular story. This is a lot of people know this. And actually one of the pancakes that still exists today in the Air Force investigated this. That's what's
wonderful. On, really? They investigated the pancakes.
A pancake that Simon, on our tax dollars, a pancake was analyzed by the Food and Drug Administration and another lab, something associated with the Air Force.
What did they come up with? What was their findings?
What you would find in a buckwheat pancake.
Oh, come on. See? Right there.
Come on.
Yeah. So that's another common thing you see.
Why would they eat refined greens? It's like the worst thing.
Reverse engineered crap from Roswell, which was pre that time, and people just wanted a stinking box pancake.
Yeah, well, that's another thing you get is like witnesses will see common objects that could be made on Earth.
There we go.
On board the craft.
So what is that? That tells me that screams reverse engineering.
Or it also
like
tells
little suits, humanoid.
Something messing with our consciousness, trickster. I mean,
wow.
Okay, so, we're going to get to a couple questions. Are you done your story? Can I get to
let me finish the story.
Okay.
What's really funny is that the Air Force investigated this because they thought that Donald E. Kehoe, who was the guy who really was hammering the Air Force constantly and the guy pushing for UFO hearings.
Right.
He was called a lobbyist. Hynek would not touch humanoid reports ever. He hated them. He really hated them. He even didn't want to deal with Betty. He didn't even want to deal with Betty and Barney Hill, because it was like a contact story to him.
There's controversy with that.
Yeah. There is.
So here you have Hynek not wanting to touch this case, and the guy that Simonton went over to with his story was a Hynek, was a NICAP member, and this guy sent the pancake and told the press that NICAP was investigating it. NICAP said, "No, we're not." And then NICAP members said, "How could you not investigate this case?" And a lot of
pancakes.
members
The sacred
dropped.
pancake is a question.
Members dropped. They were always having financial difficulties, and they were getting letters yelling at them. And the Air Force actually investigated this. Simonton, J. Allen Hynek investigated this. Simonton was considered credible by J. Allen Hynek, only he's a single witness, so you can't really do anything with that, according to Hynek. But everybody in Eagle River said, if this guy says he saw this, he saw something. We can't explain it, but this guy does not make up stories like this.
Right.
So what's really funny is that NICAP, who was a big thorn in the Air Force's side, ended up looking like an idiot. Kehoe, who was a big thorn in the Air Force's side, ended up looking really bad, where the Air Forces looked like they were smelling like a rose. They look good. They did their due diligence.
Right.
So anyway, off to your question.
I like the pancake story.
There's a lot of comments. I can't get over the refined grains and how bad they are for us, and they're eating them.
This is a two-part question from Natalie, and then we'll get to Viola.
I saw both. Okay. Natalie asks, has any investigator used dogs to investigate this phenomenon? That's her first part. And her second part is, I asked because I found 2 scientific papers published this year with intriguing facts that might explain how dogs sense and see things.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, I love dogs. But I don't know. That's a really interesting idea. I have a great dog story.
I don't agree with it on paranormal.
I have a great dog story. There's one report where a UFO was outside the house with a brilliant bright light, and a mother dog took all her puppies and carried them and hid them all behind a curtain, and then went by the curtain
She's
herself.
Like, danger. Yeah, we don't want to do that. Dogs are.
There are reports that Linda Zimmerman, she's does a UFO headquarters and has written extensively on the Hudson Valley Wave.
Right.
She wrote a book about animals' reactions to UFOs. So that would be a good source, Natalie, just to look at how animals have been reported to react to UFOs. But that's an interesting idea, using them as detectors.
She's done her research, though, because she writes the published papers show that dogs can sense heat with infrared sensors in their nose. Also, dogs' visual and olfactory parts of the brain are connected. So she's done her research.
That's really interesting.
I think this was more of asking if you've heard of it.
Yes. I haven't heard of it. That's really neat, Natalie.
Thank you, cool. Natalie. Viola Solo. I think that a small percent of abduction by UFOs might be the result of CIA experiments with implant false memories in people. This went right along with MK Ultra experiments.
If you go to Martin Willis at UFO, Martin Willis Podcast UFO on YouTube, I just wrote a blog about that.
Boom, boom, boom.
Boom, boom, boom. That from Jack Brewer's research. Jack Brewer inspired it. But John Keel was quoted as saying that during his Mothman investigations, he came upon people. He said there were people that had 2 levels of memory, and one where they reported having a wonderful experience aboard a flying saucer. And then when he dug deeper through hypnotic regression, take that for what it is, they told another story of being taken to vans and given substances and having memories implanted. He called them confabulations. So that speculation is definitely out there.
Is that like a thought record?
I love the Mothman.
Yeah. See, that's the thing, is how many people out there think that they've had this whole background of information as to even who they are, and they're not. It's like they go under hypnosis and realize, wait a minute, my whole life is a freaking dream or a lie, or I'm in the dang matrix. Like something is just,
yeah.
So in your opinion, out of all these in this research that you've done and all these blogs that you've written, because we know that we're reverse engineering. I mean, that's not even brain science anymore. I think it's pretty much become, the norm. I love listening or going back and hearing documented tales long before we could even fly. There's stuff, UFOs encounters going back to medieval times, biblical times. I mean,
are you familiar with Winthrop's journal?
No, but I would like to be.
You can, you can find it a PDF, a free PDF of it. Winthrop's journal, John Winthrop.
Okay.
He was I think the mayor of Massachusetts Bay, which became Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
He writes a story of these people. This is, I think, 1660, somewhere around there.
I'm pretty sure that
I've
I
heard
went to
this
his
story.
graveyard. I
I've
think I
actually
might
heard
even
this
have
story.
his
Yes.
gravestone on my roll of film
Yes.
when I was in Mass. Yeah.
Okay. I have
Yeah.
actually. Yes.
So,
I know
okay.
it
So
now.
I think
Yeah.
this was like right around maybe 1662,
Right.
whatever. It's very towards the end of the journal.
Mm-hmm.
The witnesses described, and he describes them as being, credible, saying they
Thanks,
were
Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
they were in a boat and on a river going downstream,
Yeah.
and they saw what they described as a light that moved in the manner of a hog.
Mhm.
So,
Right. Which
reference
was
of
quick
the,
back then. Yes.
reference
Yeah.
of the time, yes.
Yeah, wild
Yes.
hogs can run.
So
Yeah.
they're watching this light move around.
Mhm.
But the weirdest thing is that after this thing went away, they found themselves a mile upstream from where they'd been before,
Wow.
basically at their starting point.
Mhm.
So,
But there were
it-
also
it-
witnesses like a couple towns over also. Didn't they just go to a pier after that? And they
oh, you
I
know
mean,
the story.
they saw the same thing. I do. Yes. I
Yeah.
realized that. Wait, I do know this.
No.
Massachusetts.
What they were seeing all these lights in, I think in
Yeah.
Massachusetts Bay, and they
Right.
heard voices calling out to them.
Okay.
And I
Thank you,
think,
Ken.
I think,
He just gave the link. Sorry.
oh, there you go. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Thank you,
We
Ken.
Ooh,
got
yeah.
an educated audience here.
We
Awesome.
do.
We do. Sometimes I ask them the questions.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another
But
thing
see,
in
that's
Winthrop's
credible.
journal.
Even the
Yeah,
Civil
well, yeah.
War had experiences and sightings in the Civil War.
I gotta find the damn photo now. It's driving me crazy because I know I have his headstone on my phone.
But
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, how do you? I think Roswell was a game changer. I
Oh,
mean, that's at least
I'm
that
sorry.
became.
I'm biased.
I know.
I got
Yeah.
basically it's from the
It became
July
public.
the
right?
July 9th, the July 9th Roswell Daily Record. Okay.
Mhm.
Mac Brazel describes finding rubber sticks, tape with purple flowers on it, and carrying it in a bundle, maybe about 8 inches in diameter,
Right.
and and also to put it in context, the Army said they found a flying disc. Well, if you look at all the press accounts of what people described, everything was a flying disc, whether it
Yes.
was a disc or not.
Right.
Farmers would find 6-pointed radar targets on their farms
Mm.
covered in foil, and it would be described as a disc in the press.
Mhm.
So,
I know it's.
but as far as my book goes, and as far as me
Yeah.
having to take responsibility for actually
Yeah.
publishing anything on it, it was a
Right.
non-event because the investigators, the private investigators, really hadn't gotten going until 1952. There were
Right.
there were clubs, who would trade stories, but nobody investigated really until 1950. Yeah,
Mhm.
right around 1952. So the Roswell thing just came and went and was a non-event by the time the investigators got going.
Right.
It really didn't become anything until Stanton Friedman and others
Yeah.
resurrected it late 1970s.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
he had some really valid points. I was fortunate enough to have interviewed him. And
Oh, wow.
I think Roswell, when you look at it, it becomes almost like a political conversation, and you have to be very careful.
Yeah.
What you say and to whom, that's why I just sit
As
back and
Charles
listen.
bows out gratefully. Just grateful
Like I
out of
said,
there.
I don't mean with me, because I'm not the ufology researcher. I'm in the paranormal, but I'm just saying from what I've noticed from multiple interviews that I have to be careful how I pose a question and what I ask. People can get very almost political with the story of Roswell. You have the diehard believers, and then you have the diehard and there's no in between with Roswell. It's not like Area 51 where everybody's convinced there's shit going on down there. Roswell is like this. Area 51's like this, you know? And if you can't see what I'm doing, sorry, everybody who's tuning in. I'm just saying there's extreme polar opposites.
Right.
You
big
know.
big fish, little fish.
Nice.
Yes,
There we
thank
go.
you.
There
Thank
we
you. Yeah,
go.
big pond, little pond. Yeah, same
There we
thing.
go.
I found from the multiple interview. I mean, we've done hundreds of interviews, and I'm just very careful.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I'm
yeah.
just
I mean,
careful.
you
Yeah.
know, I like to say it's my opinion. You know,
Yeah, no,
Right.
and I'm
absolutely,
open to
definitely. And you've done your research to do that. I
yeah.
haven't, but I just found that there's two answers. There's no middle ground with Roswell, and I just find it intriguing.
Yeah.
Makes you want to learn more about it because you want to understand why people believe in it so wholeheartedly, and you want to
Well,
understand why people don't believe in it. I do want to understand that.
there's another way to look at it too, though. There are researchers that get caught up in a single case,
Yes.
and what happens is, if you've staked your whole career on the single case and you're tracking and you're finding stuff that validates it and validates and validates it, and it's looking really good. And so say you're 20 years into it, 10 years into it, and then all of a sudden something comes up that says this might not be true. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think you're going to
tank.
suddenly turn around when you've based your whole career on it being true? That's a really real danger for any researcher.
Absolutely.
To focus on a single case.
Yeah, it's a fair statement, and it works both ways. It works where you don't find anything and all of a sudden all this proof is coming and you have to accept that this is true. It works both on both
absolutely
sides.
Yeah
Yeah. Not of this argument. I mean, there's people who don't believe in UFOs and they find all this research to prove that this was done by the government and this is fake and this is that, and then the real stuff comes by them and they're like, no way. It's like, wait a minute. If you believe the research on the internet saying it doesn't exist, why aren't you believing the research that it does? So you have to be open-minded with all of this stuff, right?
We do have a question. Yeah.
I'm looking at Natalie's question.
Yes.
Natalie,
were there U.S. investigators in Thailand and Vietnam during the Vietnam War?
There were reports in Vietnam. I'm definitely aware of. I don't know about Thailand. I do write about Asian cases. But in terms of investigators at the time, no, I don't believe so. But I know reports definitely came out of Vietnam. And I don't think I've ever done, in terms of modern investigators in Thailand and Vietnam, that'd be interesting to look into. I haven't.
Absolutely, right? Especially with the technology richness of the education in Asia. Can you imagine if they were getting a little help?
Well, there are different. What's interesting is there's still a big language barrier, even today. I tried to research some sightings in Japan, and it's real hard to get information.
They just developed a new UFO task force research.
Those are the guys I reached out to. They have Kenichiwa Rise archives. So I wrote a blog about this. It's just a really cool case where this guy, he was a farmer. His dog was causing a ruckus, and he got up,
dogs,
see what was going on, and opened his door, and there in front of him was essentially a four-armed cephalopod. Two of its arms were used as arms, and two of its arms were used as legs. The proper term is arms, not tentacles. That's why I called them all arms. Anyway, And it was dressed in, according to him, dressed in a vinyl suit, and took him aboard a craft. And he jumped out of the craft. He was thrown out of. He went to run away and was thrown out of the craft, and then met with the creature again and claimed the creature took him up in his craft again. This time he went for the trip. He was given a rock from Titan.
Wow.
And then when he went to have the rock analyzed, and this actually made the newspaper when he went to get the rock analyzed, and was told that it was a normal rock, another one of those, from that could have come from an area quarry. And so he was ridiculed in the press. And then he went on to claim that he had powers to cause earthquakes and bend spoons and all this other crazy stuff. Another example of a witness going off the rails, but maybe something originally happened to him. But the guy who investigated this was Kenichi Arai. And I reached out to this organization you were just describing, and they sent me a form letter completely in Japanese.
You're kidding. They don't have anything in English being a
through Google Translate.
International language.
All of their press releases. We're starting an international UFO investigation organization. And so here I reach out to them and I get a form letter in Japanese. So.
They don't.
Maybe you should try university and ask them in the linguistics department if they can translate this for you.
I did. I Google translated.
Just Google Translate.
But Google Translate will never give you.
It was it was a form letter saying we're basically too busy to respond to your request.
Oh, that sucks.
Maybe you just have to, get one of the higher ups.
So
like Joe.
I found that Asia is pretty difficult to investigate, though. Like I said, Kenichi Arai did, leave some records and write some books that are accessible. So there are some cases that I were able to look at, and there are other researchers that did as well.
Right.
But like Thailand, I think I found something in Thailand. Vietnam, I don't know if they have active investigators there now. But it's interesting. From culture to culture, you get different countries seem to have a different flavor.
Right.
I can't really define that flavor, but there are different aspects to the reports that you don't see in other countries.
Right.
For instance, a famous report from Poland, I forget where it was from, but like a farmer had two creatures jump in his horse cart and take him to their UFO. He went up into the UFO. It was this big square object, but he described all these dead birds like piled against a wall in it, which is really weird. And so like, and it definitely had a certain flavor to it. And the Japanese reports, like for instance, that creature, it definitely has a Japanese flavor to it, when
you should really try France, because anything I've researched, France has apparently been very open with their public, like their citizens, about UFOs.
I've done. GEPEN was the French organization.
Apparently something gets out there, they just put it right out there.
South American countries have been back and forth, very open with their investigations.
Italy as well. Italy's got a huge UFO community.
Are you familiar with the Sanfretta case?
No, I don't know about Michelle because I don't follow it, but I'm just saying I know that we had, was it Daryl Sims who goes to Italy all the time and meets with a community there?
Yeah, I'm sure you've got them everywhere, but no, not familiar with the case at all.
That's really what's really interesting about that case is that it was investigated by a journalist who was not interested in UFOs, whatever. Rino Di Stefano. He wrote a book about it called the Sanfretta case. It's a kind of clumsily translated, but it's still a really good account. But essentially, what it was is this private security guard who was hired to make the rounds of the local villages around I think it was around the Italian Alps.
The Dolomiti.
He saw these lights on this property. He went to investigate, and he encountered this huge 9-foot tall creature with sort of triangular glowing eyes, weird spikes coming out of its head, huge feet. And
it wasn't a reptilian?
It was very unique, just totally unique. He described his mouth as being sort of looking like a metal grill. And
it sounds a bit like they can project what they want you to see.
Or maybe they know his fear and that's what they projected, right?
It just seems so obscure.
Crazy.
Well, what's really crazy is this guy, this guard had his fellow security guards from the company came out to look for him and found him face down on the ground. He freaked out. I think he grabbed his gun. They had to take his gun away from him. They reported, and so they told all this to Di Stefano when he interviewed them. So they described that this guy was freaked out. And another common thing that they said his head was really hot, even though it was a really cold night. So he started to be taken up in the craft, and this creatures and others like it started talking to him, and it turned into a contactee experience. And this happened repeatedly, and the guy would go missing, and they'd have to go looking for him. They'd find his car abandoned, and then him, like, on the edge of a cliff, or over a cliff on a ledge. And the same thing, his head would be hot, and sometimes the inside of the car would be hot. And there were other times where the car was described as having traveled a distance that it could not have possibly traveled in the time given at night in incredible snow. And Stefano describes in this book actually driving these courses and trying to duplicate the time and not being able to come near it. And so what's really neat is they rigged up the security guard's car. His last Piero Fortunato Zanfretta was his name. They rigged up his car without him knowing it. He reported also that his car was lifted up into the craft at one point. So they rigged his cars with cables that if the car was lifted up, the cables would break because the wheels would, the way the axles were, the wheels would go down. The cables would break. They also put thermometers in the car that would record the highest temperature. And an episode happened. They found them, took the car back. All the cables were broken, and the temperature recorded was really, really high, even though
Okay, but did Reno Di Stefano know that his car was rigged?
Reno Di Stefano described and watched them rigging it
as an experiment.
As an experiment,
right?
Zanfretta, Zanfretta.
Zanfretta was the one who drove
Zanfretta
it.
was
I was a little confused. Thank you. He was not aware that this was all rigged.
Right.
Totally wow, interesting. Totally very interesting.
So that is a very interesting case. It's really
no
weird.
kidding.
And the fact that it's written by a journalist who had no interest in UFOs.
To be honest, like to be in the Dolomiti and at night, it is freezing cold up there. Freezing cold. It's a place that you can ski in the summer. It's cold.
Right.
That is impressive that it got that hot. That's scary.
Yeah.
It's very impressive because it's colder than here. There, like it's cold.
Well, we're down at the 10:30 mark, so I know that you are limited as to your time with us. So, do you want to tell everybody where to buy your book, promote yourself before you leave us?
I'm Amazon.com. So get it in many formats. The Flying Saucer Investigators by Charles Lear. I also write a regular blog for Martin Willis over at podcastufo.com. I do an audio blog version of it that can be found at Martin Willis's YouTube site. podcastufo.com. Martin Willis will probably get you there. And I
Great.
guess that's it. But it's been a real pleasure talking to you,
Oh,
Tori.
Oh,
it's
it's
been
been
a lot of
great. Thank
fun.
you.
Thank you for the amazing
Talking
stories.
Yeah.
with you two. Excuse me. I hope I didn't
Yeah.
talk to you too
No,
much.
no,
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 no.
no, no. It
You'll
was a lot of
find
fun.
we're
Mm.
very round table like. So here
Yeah.
was like we want you as the guest to just say as much as you want, and we find that we follow along, and we all have a lot of fun, and all the while getting as much information out as possible. So thank you. It's just been
Thank you.
really educational. I love the stories. Honestly, there's some of these things I'm gonna have to just like, come on.
Start looking up. I know.
I know. We're looking
And
for
I've
these
got to
little.
find that picture. And if I do, I will send it to you, Charles, because
Well,
I'm
that'd be very
positive
cool.
that I saw the whole family's grave site. Because I went to a lot of graveyards when I went to Boston and outside of Boston as well.
I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
and as far as archives go to find all this really cool stuff, the APRO Bulletin is a great place to look. You can find that at files.afu.se. That's the Archives for the Unexplained Sweden. That's all
Cool.
small letters. You can find the NICAP UFO investigator at nicap.org, which unbelievably is still a website. And qfos.org also has a website, and you can find a lot of their files there. So they're and just keep looking. They're
Stay within the
archives.org.
community.
They're at Flying Saucer Review. You can get issues there from
Wow.
Northern Ontario UFO Research Society. He's got Flying Saucer investigators. Like I
Yeah.
said, you can find all these super cool cases from
Michelle
all
comes
over
from
the area.
Northern Ontario.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
Lots of them up there.
She knows all
Right.
about them.
Yeah.
I
So
wonder why
I've
I'm a
never
little.
seen one. I've never
Yeah.
seen one. So
Yeah,
So
I have tons.
yeah. So for anybody who's interested in looking at
Mm.
finding a lot of cases that it should have
Yeah.
been classics but weren't classics.
Right, right. Oh no,
There's
I love
a
it. It just
lot
gives
of
us
really fun stuff out there.
a place to go and start looking. So of course, the archive will this will be there forever. So people will be able to go and start doing research of their own. And of course, if they have any, crazy far out there stories, they can just contact you or contact Philip or, wherever. Flying Disc Press people.
Right
Right.
on. Okay,
All right.
well, have a
thank
great
you
Thank you,
night.
so much. Have
Charles.
a good weekend.
Thank
Enjoy your
you.
long weekend.
Oh
Yes.
yes, thank you. All right,
All
you
right.
too.
Thank you. Good
Cheers.
night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
I'm
Time for that. Yes, let's do
Yes.
the sponsor ID.
Absolutely. You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live on 105.3 FM radio from the gorgeous city of New Orleans. Tonight's guest was Charles Lear. We had an incredible discussion about his book and flying saucers and ETs and races. If you missed it, don't worry about it. We'll be in archive shortly.
Yes.
And we'd like to give a huge shout out and thank you to the amazing people at Folgers Coffee for fully sponsoring our show from day one. Thank you for your support and your continuing sponsorship. I could use a coffee right now. A huge thank you for our outro and intro to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, Justin Snicker, award-winning composer and musician. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp and follow him on Facebook and Instagram. So stream or listen to our archives on the platform you normally use. Please remember to subscribe and like us too.
There we go. Woohoo. Well, that was really interesting because I am a huge fan of the Mothman prophecies. I'm a huge fan of John Keel. He really was a pioneer in ufology. And a lot of times people don't piece the two together because it seems so obscure. But when you start getting into even, some of the guests that we've had on in the last week or so, even last night when they spoke about when we had Brian Allen and Barry Fitzgerald, and they were talking about certain entities being the shining ones that would appear, before war, things like that. And you have the Mothman who would appear allegedly before all these big disasters would happen throughout the world. It sort of makes you wonder if they're one of the same, these interdimensional beings, or are they extraterrestrial in origin? So I find it fascinating. Synchronicities, like it's just all
Yeah, it
these
seems,
stories,
I agree with you. It seems to be pointing more and more to Mothman being of another galaxy rather than,
Well,
something demonic.
we have a gentleman called Ron Moorhead coming on in October, and he talks about Bigfoot. He has a book called Quantum Bigfoot. And a lot of times when Bigfoot is seen, they'll see light orbs around him, or they'll see a craft, much like the whole, Skinwalker Ranch phenomenon, where you have skinwalkers just sort of appearing, and you have all this UFO activity, and they have like crypto and paranormal. And it's sort of a curiosity as to whether I've heard a lot of people say that Bigfoot itself was believed to be extraterrestrial, interdimensional for sure. Corey Good, who kind of, came out as a whistleblower, made mention of seeing the occasional Bigfoot in underground bases and things like that. So I have to wonder, like, okay, would you just capture one? Because I go back to that story of Mount St. Helen when
Yeah.
it blew, how they were military helicopters were taking out, where people saw them taking out 1, 2, maybe could even have been 3 Bigfoot off the mountain.
That's crazy.
Right?
I find Bigfoot to be like Roswell and Mothman. You're either in it or you're out of it. It's such a, I don't know, it's so touchy with some people.
But is that what these beings are? All these
I know.
cryptids,
I
right?
wonder myself.
Yeah.
I wonder myself that all the time.
Well, how many times have we talked even about the Loch Ness Monster with people on the show, where it's like they say, well, if the loch isn't big enough to sustain an animal this big, okay, so is it a portal?
The loch isn't closed off.
Oh, I know, right? I know.
Like,
Researching.
oh no, I want to hear more about Bigfoot. Will you be having researchers on anytime
Natalie, soon? Yes, actually, Natalie, we've got, let me just look here for a second.
We usually have them every month for sure.
Well, Bigfoot, I mean, Ron is coming on with the Quantum Bigfoot. You guys will actually know, Ron, if you have been following the Alaskan killer Bigfoot, Ron was brought on as a special guest. And he's on October 27th. And then we've got John Kuykendall coming on about Bigfoot November the 3rd.
And he's been on before.
He has been on before. You could find his archives. So they are, we do bring them on periodically. But I guess there's just only so much information out there. So with that, I think, I'm really looking forward to it.
Elbow cough. He's actually, he has his own magazine called Bigfoot Magazine.
Yes, that's right.
So you'll be able to Google him. And if you find him on Facebook, he's probably got our podcast on his, but you could probably scroll down on the Outer Realm Facebook page and find the archive for that show.
Oh, it goes in the Wayback Machine now.
Goes in the real Wayback Machine. He was one of our first guests.
Yeah, it could be way back there, but definitely. Yeah. Otherwise, go to SoundCloud and catch the audio archive and just look for him there. He should be there anywhere, Spotify,
any platform you can
iTunes,
find.
Any platform that you listen to.
United Public Radio first.
Yes, and then just once you hit on to the network, then just go in and Google Little Old Us, and you should definitely find that. So
Little Old Us.
I know, but I just think that there's so much to all these cryptids. It's even when you come down to dogmen being werewolves, when you come into
thank you, Natalie.
Even vampires, Well, I'm glad you found us. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you. We love your comments, by the way. We love everyone participating and interacting. I love learning from all of you.
It's true. We've got great people in chat. We go, for those who don't know, simultaneously across 8 different platforms during every show. So
just live. Yeah.
And I always say, no matter where you're watching, please like us, love us, subscribe, whatever the case may be. And show us some love and support the way we show you love and support by bringing all these amazing people and great, topic matter to the show, because let me tell you what, there's a lot of good content with people who have never been on the show before, and
Yeah.
some who have, who are just mind-blowing. Good stuff coming. Just saying. Okay, Bubbles, I know you're just busting at the seams for this one.
Such a
Okay.
freaking pet peeve.
Okay, here we
So
go.
I go on a very well-known site to purchase books that you can
Okay.
purchase anything on. And I mean anything.
Okay.
And I was so intrigued by this set that I didn't read the description. So the first part is already on me. And I said, oh, I've got to have this book, not reading the description of how the books are. Now, let me tell you something. I am a grown-ass woman. I'm 53
Thanks,
years old.
Natalie.
I bought this book called Most Haunted Exorcisms and Possessions.
Ooh.
I do not need a print this large to read. Please, when you're writing stuff, please stop doing this. It's just ridiculous. I feel like I'm reading a primary book. I was really disappointed. Maybe I shouldn't do this, but if you want to argue with me, Matthew Clark, you can give us a call and we'll even put you on so you can talk about why you did this. I'm just really annoyed by that. If you're going to have a smaller book, then just have a smaller book. You're printing in primary form. It's driving me crazy, to be honest with you.
Maybe just send it back.
Yeah, well, definitely going to send them all back. I was
Some
really,
people like the magazine style though.
This is really big, Michelle. This is like a 48 font.
Jesus.
That's large. Like, look at that.
For those of us who need
And
our
everything
glasses,
in
so.
here is stuff. There's nothing unique about this book. You can just Google this information. It was really disappointing because it wasn't described that way. So it was really disappointing and my fault for not continuing. I love these little books. They're called, this one's Demoniality, Incubi and Succubi, a book of demonology. It's not a book of demonology, but at least this is like what it should look like in the inside of a book. Sorry. I know I might get some hateful email, but I really don't care. The Book of Forbidden Knowledge. I'm not reading these. I'm going to reference because these are first edition 1910s reprinted. So this is not something that was written by anyone in the last 10 years. The new edition came out in 2016 and it was edited, but the first edition 1910s was Johnson Smith and Company. And it's amazing. I love these books, these little books. I love them. Great reference. Use it for good. I just want to put that out there. Use it for good. It's good. It's good to reference for if you're seeing things or you need to understand symbols and things like that. It's one of those good little small books if you're just starting. I think it's great. And then I've got the Demonology of King James, original edition 1597, King James 1.
Right.
The edit. And I thought that was really awesome without, spending like, what is it, 100,000 for a first edition. But yeah, I was disappointed with this Most Haunted because there is a series of different ones. And I feel like this to me is a money grab. So I wouldn't recommend this book at all. But I'm going to have to do one of those moments of rants on the show. But these three, really good buy. Like I said, I know you probably hate me right now for doing this. Oh shit. But no, it was just
send your emails to Joe Montaldo.
That's a great idea.
Our producer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. I was just disappointed because I felt money grab. Like this was just really, I felt like here I am at the
return
thank
it and
you,
review
Natalie.
it.
I am going to. It just came in. But like it was really disappointing. I'm like, this is nothing. It's completely a money grab. Somebody, and it's probably plagiarized as well because
you can't even make that accusation though until you read it. You're gonna get
I said probably. I said probably.
You will get a spank.
Yeah, but I said probably because spanking. I can see that. And my friend Andrea's story is in here, and I can already see the errors in that. But anyways, Just saying.
Yeah.
It was frustrating for me because I'm concerned about people who buy these things and believe all of these stories and then maybe
Everything has to be taken with a grain of salt, right? When you read a book.
Yeah. It's just sad. It's really sad because there are a bunch of stories just thrown together that probably would have fit on 20 pages with regular font.
But that's the idea.
Excuse me. Sorry, allergies.
Waiting for that to happen. So, okay.
Sorry, allergies.
Yeah.
Return it and review it. I definitely will. How much editing before broadcasting? What do you mean?
How much editing before broadcasting? Elaborate. I don't do any editing.
Of this? I went through the whole book in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Whole book, 10 minutes. With that kind of print, you can get through this in like 10 minutes. Seriously.
Yeah.
And when you know the stories and you're reading it, it's
yeah.
Yeah, because there's exorcisms in here, but there's also Son of Sam, which doesn't fit in here at all. But
no, but I remember doing a show on connections, somebody else's show on connections between some of the alleged serial killers and their fascination with, demons and darkness and the devil is, devil made me do it sort of thing. And there were a couple that were thought to have even been, like with severe attachments. So I don't know. I can maybe see where he was going with it, but that's something that, again, it's just very much hearsay. But a lot of it, is hearsay. The thing is about the paranormal is that it's an industry, or it's an area that's very hard to prove or be credible. I mean, I spent freaking 20 years making sure that at least you hold on to your integrity, because for me, I've always said, I don't have all the answers. People have seen me on TV, you get labeled as an expert. There are no experts in this field. There are some people who know a crap load of stuff. And there are some who, like myself, I know a lot of stuff, but I make a point of learning and educating myself on a regular basis. And I don't just look. Like, I would look at a book like that and say, okay. I would go in and start researching that information on the stories, cross-referencing those stories.
This isn't done at all, because I'm telling you, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying,
No, I'm looking at the Perrin family. Now, I've read Andrea's books and I'm friends with Andrea, and Roger Perrin and his daughters were desperate for assistance and called Ed and Lorraine Warren. That is a lie. And I know that for a fact, that it's a lie. Someone else contacted them without telling them that they were contacted. This is telling a story based on a movie that they watched. It's not factual. Son of Sam is not factual. I actually studied the case of Son of Sam and did a whole series on serial killers. So I do have knowledge of this. Okay, I do know. And it's demonic possession. He's labeling it as demonic possession. Like, I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Look for his website. Send him an email.
Yeah, website. That's the funny thing. But he has a whole bunch of books started, and he's claiming they're the most haunted. So there's another claim. Most haunted places in America, places in the UK, places in Canada, hospitals and asylums. I don't know. Like, I'm just telling you, this is definitely going back. There's a lot of incorrect information in here, and I feel bad for anyone who's buying this stuff thinking it's real.
Leave a review, because a lot of people go and look for reviews when
Amazon is one of the worst places to read a review.
Yeah, but the fact is, they're there.
Yeah,
I look at reviews. I actually
do, but
Google
I look
reviews.
at them. I'll look at them on Reddit or on something else
Anywhere.
before
I
I
Google
look at
reviews
them on.
and saves me a lot of angst.
I wonder if
I
I should have read reviews before, but I don't think there are any on this. But it's definitely going back. Like I said, it was just frustrating because when I saw it, it looked
Maybe it's
so
just great
incredibly.
for young adults, who prefer to have something like that. If they're going to look for something, they're not going to look at a really in-depth book.
But it's not good for them because it's not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem, because he is stating a scary journey in the most famous true stories of exorcisms and demonic possessions. None of these have been validated, and none of the stories there's a lot of misinformation here.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have a problem with that. I would imagine that the victims of the Son of Sam would have a problem with the way this was written as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're writing about serial killers, you're also affecting the families of the victims that are left behind.
Mm-hmm.
That
That's
doesn't
really
stop.
difficult.
That's a ripple effect.
It is, because a lot of these serial killers, they are still, it's not back to the Jack the Ripper days here. These are current times, in the last few decades, and you are going to have survivors and people who are affected, like their family members and such. A lot of people don't think of things like that, even when you're putting something on television and some stories. You have to be mindful of the people who are left behind. And it's not even just the victims' families, it is also the killer's family. People don't take that into account. Like some of them, some of them turn in their own family members. Others, they're victims too, because they can never show their face again. Guilty by association. Like there's some, and they feel for
Can you imagine being
families.
related to a serial killer? I'd change my name. I mean, Carla
I'm sure
Homolka's
many
sister
have.
changed her name.
I'm sure many have.
Carla Homolka's sister changed her name.
Sure, so did Carla Homolka.
Well, she married
Yeah.
married her attorney's brother, because who else would do that?
Oh, yeah, we're not dealing with a whole bunch of scruples there in the first place, but
No.
it happens. So it's always good to do your homework when you are buying a book or even a film, anything,
I'm
any
glad
product.
that it came to me, though. Maybe I know I ranted, and I apologize for that. I don't hate you. I just dislike what you did here. Yeah. It's definitely a lesson in reviewing, but it's also, I think maybe I'll touch someone who's reading this and thinking this is real and it's happening to them. And I just want to I want to help that as well. Like it just, some of these books that the younger generation buy, and they believe in it, and then they start acting things out and doing things like communication and stuff like that, because it becomes so cool to them. If you're going to buy a book, I always like like when there's an original that's written and it's not very edited, like these kind of books. I love these. And I love and some people have complained about this, but I actually love this, where they will take the original and they scan it and put it in print for you in a book of the original. So it's untouched. I love those. And you can get them there as well.
Yeah.
But that's definitely going back. I thought, good thing I didn't buy the whole series. I only took the one, because of course you find it intriguing with a title like that.
You do.
Oh, I love what Natalie says. The lessons you learn from buying and returning it will be a gift to us all, and what results from your disgust for its content and determination to help others find information. Thank you, Natalie. I adore you. I get very passionate about things when they're put out there. Working in crime for so long, you really watch everything that you say and do. And when I see things that are misrepresented, it's painful, because I've worked with victims' families. So it's a big one for me,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do believe in raising awareness, so to speak. I might have done it a bit
a nice way of putting it. Just Amelia's more of a pit bull than a stealth bomber.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's just like, it's, we've done the same thing with watching different television shows, and I've got my pet peeves, because I think research should be done a certain way. I think most researchers who are credible believe that things should be done a certain way, and usually you don't do something that puts the family at risk, or that would do something to compromise the location. So, I get real funny when I see something on television where, they compromise the location and put the family or people
Oh,
in the building at risk. I have seen a few shows like that, and I try not to name them. I try to be really, not even so much delicate, but I try to have integrity with anything that I do professionally. But I'll tell you, there's a right way to do things and the wrong way to do things. And at the end of the day, if you're doing something for ratings, you're doing it for the wrong reason.
it's more
And if,
money.
well, for sure, but think about it, because this stuff doesn't go away. You are on television, this stuff will float around forever. I'm always so humbled when somebody messages me and says, I think I saw you in something going back, like you had blonde hair. I'm like, oh, God, I was like in 2007. But they're like, they love the story so much. Like, I really connected with that. Thank you. It's just like, that makes me happy. And I know the story they're talking about. I never got paid to do any of these things. I was just,
No.
you go to tell your story. You go for people to find you, because if you need help, then they know, you know what, that's that person. You'll come and they'll seek me out. I get so many wonderful emails and messages that I just think is mind blowing to me. Don't go in and do something ridiculous, because it can come back and haunt you at any given time. Okay. Always do the right thing.
You never
Always
know
do the right
who's
thing.
watching, or you never know who's reading,
That's right.
So
Might just happen to be someone who's got like 3 million listeners every night. I
or
don't
someone
know.
who's got a hell of a lot of connections in law.
Just it's a mix of a lot of different things,
Yeah.
people. Always do the right thing. But, as we're nearing on to almost the top of the hour, we're going to wind it down. And I was just really, really happy. Great show with Charles Lear. He's just got some amazing stories. And because they go so far back, I haven't heard a lot of these
In
stories.
a
So it's
long
like,
time.
I know. So it's like, wow. But big thank you to Charles for coming on and spending as much time as he could with us. And hey, thank you,
See,
Kira.
so sweet. Yeah.
And big thank you to Folgers Coffee. Big thank you to Dr. Snick. And always appreciative, so appreciative for our sponsors. If you'd like to see a specific guest or topic on the show, or you have any questions, please email us at theouterrealmcontact@gmail.com. That's theouterrealmcontact@gmail.com. Also, like I said, please subscribe, support us, whether you're liking us, joining us, subscribing to us, whatever platform you're watching, whether it's the network, whether it's the Outer Realm. Please definitely show your support. We work very hard for you, and we all try to have a good time on show night. Next week, we welcome back the return, of course, of Cheryl Costa. She's going to be doing, I think, part 2 on magic, and she's a whole lot of fun. If you guys, she's been on twice, talked about UFOs the first time and part 1 of magic the last time. She is a hoot, and we all have a really good time. Thursday night, we welcome for the first time Dr. Shamail Wolverton Sihan. I hope I said that properly. And she's going to be discussing her new book based or called The Science of Miracles, which is going to be super interesting. So tomorrow night, tune in for the Church of Mavis, 8 until 10 p.m. That's going to be Eastern, and the Centralist, which is 10 until whenever on Friday evening. And that's going to be your political show. So you guys need to vent. That's the one to do it on. So everyone behave yourselves, and we shall see you next week. So good night.